All right, hey guys, someone said we about to hop into a reaction of First Things First. Though, make sure you like that video, battle, exit full screen, scroll a bit, like it, full screen it back up. You feel me? I have eaten a pound of ground beef for the last 2 days for dinner. I've been trying to get my protein up because my friend recommended me to do that because I wasn't really eating a whole lot of protein. Now, granted, my gains are still pretty good because I was consistent in the gym. Make sure you hit the gym. We are getting into a reaction coming from our reaction is coming from Biblical Bookworm called The Hardest Church Teaching. Let's just check it out. Thumbnail couldn't even tell you what it was, but we just gonna check it out.
Today I'd like to talk about the hardest church teaching. It's a teaching that all Christian denominations agreed on up until the last 100 years. But because of an increasing societal pressure, one denomination after the other abandoned this teaching. But one denomination refuses to yield, even though 98% of its own members don't obey it. And the teaching I'm talking about is contraception. In this video, I'll explore why the Catholic Church still stands firm in condemning contraception. I'll address the most common objections against this teaching, and at the very end, I'll also share my thoughts on this teaching as a young Catholic woman. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this is a difficult teaching. So why on earth does the Catholic Church teach that contraception
I didn't notice she was Catholic anyway.
is immoral? There are actually multiple reasons, and I'd like to present 3 of those briefly. I'll start with the weakest argument, and I will end with the strongest one. Interestingly, the biblical foundation of this teaching led a well-known formerly Protestant couple to convert to Catholicism, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. First of all, there are practical reasons against contraception because its use causes certain societal problems. St. Pope Paul VI predicted in his landmark encyclical Humanae Vitae that the use of contraception will have the following societal consequences: marital infidelity, moral decline, increased objectification of women, and governmental coercion in reproductive matters. Marital infidelity and moral decline follow from the fact that sexual sins obviously have fewer immediate consequences with contraception. For example, without contraception, it's much easier to say no to premarital sex because this sin could have consequences for the next 18 years. Regarding the increased objectification of women, the Pope wrote the following: "A man who grows accustomed to the use of contraceptive methods may forget the reverence due to a woman and, disregarding her physical and emotional equilibrium, reduce her to being a mere instrument for the satisfaction of his own desires, no longer considering her as his partner, whom he should surround with care and affection." I don't think that it would be a stretch to say that sexual objectification of women and also sexual self-objectification by women has reached new heights in recent decades.
Not only that, but divorce is up. I don't remember if that was in the list of things, but marital infidelity probably up. I know marriage divorce is up, right? Moral decline, people are sad as ever. Objectification of women also, like she just said, it's crazy up there. Governmental insurance, bro. Like, was this list? When was this video made? 4 days ago. Okay, so maybe this list is made to show how these things are coming into fruition, but regardless, that is still crazy that we're hitting on each single one of them. Also, another question: are condoms considered contraception? Because I'm not gonna say what I think in terms of I think there's a Bible verse about it. If there is, she'll probably get to it. If it's not, I don't think it's a Bible verse, but it might just be some other thing. But technically it's not the same as if you took like the day after pill where it's like, well, it fertilized the egg and then that when does the human get born? And if the human gets born at conception, so the egg is hit or the sperm is hit the egg and the baby started forming and the contraceptive kills it, that's a sin because you just killed a human or you just killed a future life, whatever the case is. I believe life forms at conception, right? When the sperm hits the egg, I believe that's when life starts. Personally, I wrote a paper about it for class, specifically using a lot of Bible verses, so that's what I believe based on what I think the Bible teaches. Granted, I haven't read through the whole Bible, so maybe there's something else, but that's what I believe. Anyway, and I don't think a condom changed that because it never happens, meaning it stopped it. Same with like you want to talk about the pull-out method, whatever you want to talk about. I don't think that's contraception, so to speak, but maybe it is. We're gonna see how she defines it. If she defines it in the video, let's keep going.
And, disregarding her physical and emotional equilibrium, reduce her to being a mere instrument for the satisfaction of his own desires, no longer considering her as his partner, whom he should surround with care and affection. I don't think that it would be a stretch to say that sexual objectification of women and also sexual self-objectification by women has reached new heights in recent decades. Finally, an example of governmental coercion would be the one-child policy in China. So the Pope was right with all of his predictions. A second argument why the Catholic Church is opposed to contraception is because contraception violates natural law. Arguments from natural law determine the purpose of things by examining their nature. So basically, you can look at the nature of something and the purpose of something and then determine what the correct use of that thing would be. To give you an example, eating has the purpose of nourishing the body, and because of that, it would be disordered to throw up food after eating. Now, what's the natural purpose of sex? Sex has two purposes. The first one is very obvious. Sex is for procreation. But there's also a second purpose, namely that sex is for the unity of the couple. The hormones that get released during sex bond the couple together, which benefits both them and their children. Excluding one purpose is a violation of the nature of sex. And contraception is a clear example of excluding the procreative purpose of sex. You might be wondering now whether this means that sex should only be had with the direct intention of making babies, and I'll get to that point in the part where I talk about objections. Now, the last argument against contraception that I'd like to talk about today, and that's in my opinion the most convincing and beautiful argument, is that contraception violates the nature of love. In my last video, I deduced this in detail, but for those who haven't watched that video yet, here's a quick summary of the argument. God is love. Humans are made in his image. Since there is one God in three persons, the so-called Trinity, God is a communion of persons. From this it follows that humans reflect God the best when they are in communion. The closest communion humans can enter into is sex. This means that sex is meant to be an expression of love. Also, since God is three divine persons united in one, this means that the love that humans are meant to reflect is supposed to be unitive. And since God is love and he created the universe and ultimately humans out of love, the love which sex is meant to reflect is also supposed to be procreative. This is what sex is meant to express: love. Unitive and procreative love, which are inextricably linked. It's also crucial to understand that marriage is a covenant and not a contract. This means that marriage is not an exchange of goods and services, but an exchange of persons. At the altar, spouses make a total gift of themselves to each other, and sex is meant to express that. But using contraception contradicts the notion of a total gift of self. Sex is meant to express the wedding vows through the body, so it's meant to say, I love all of you with all of my being, and I will always love you. And I'm open to perpetuate our love into eternity by bringing an immortal soul into this world. This is why the Catholic Church teaches that contraception is morally wrong, because contraception excludes the procreative aspect of marital love. In line with this, the Church also teaches that IVF is morally wrong because it in turn excludes the unitive aspect of procreation. So in the end, the best argument for chastity, including marital chastity, aspect of procreation. So in the end, the best argument for chastity, including marital chastity, is that it makes for better love. Now, at the beginning of this video, I mentioned a well-known formerly Protestant couple that converted to Catholicism because they recognized the biblical foundation of that teaching. The couple I was talking about are Kimberly and Scott Hahn. Their biblical reason to reject contraception was exactly this, that marriage is a covenant and not a contract. If you're interested to learn more about their conversion story, you can check out this video. Now let's get to possible objections or questions that might arise regarding this topic. Namely, what about responsible family planning? Natural family planning is permitted by the Church, but isn't that the same as contraception? What about infertile? Natural family planning is permitted by the Church, but isn't that the same as contraception?
What is natural family planning? Because it doesn't equal now I'm confused. Anyway, let's let her continue.
What about infertile couples? Or what about the argument that contraception reduces the number of abortions? And what about diseases that can only be treated with contraceptive pills? Before I get to these questions, I'd like to address another important issue. It has been brought to my attention that most of you aren't subscribed to this channel. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, and in return, I promise that I will listen to your feedback and improve this channel video by video. Now let's get to the question, what about responsible family planning? While the Catholic Church prohibits the use of artificial contraception, it must be pointed out that it's still important to plan families responsibly. The goal of marriage isn't just procreation, but also education of the children that result from the marriage. Apart from that, children should also be provided with dignified living conditions and sufficient emotional care. All of that is only possible with responsible family planning. This can and should be achieved through so-called natural family planning, or NFP, which takes advantage of the naturally occurring infertile periods in a woman's cycle. The Catholic Church encourages research in this area so that couples can plan their families with greater precision. So NFP doesn't have to rely on the calendar method alone. Rather, any currently available method to determine a woman's infertile window can be used. However, the Church teaches...
Hold up. It's the first time I'm hearing about this. There's a period of time where women are infertile, or are we talking about the 9 months when they're already pregnant so they can't get pregnant again? Or... Hold on, let me do a quick Google search real fast. So there's cervical mucus, basal body temperature, menstrual cycles. Because I know there's a common question that's like, girls can't get pregnant on their periods, which is not true. I know that much. However, this is the first time I'm hearing about this thingy. But anyway, let's continue, because now that I'm confused.
teaches that the couple must have just reasons for spacing births. Pope Pius XII used the phrasing well-grounded reasons and grave reasons, and Saint Pope Paul VI used the phrase serious motives. The popes list the following possible reasons. Pope Paul VI mentions the physical or psychological condition of husband or wife and external circumstances. And Pope Pius XII adds medical, eugenic, economic, and social reasons. The part about eugenics might sound like the church is saying people with certain genetic risks shouldn't have kids, but read in light of the earlier encyclical Casti Connubii by Pope Pius XI, who was the immediate predecessor of Pope Pius XII, it's clear that this is not what is meant at all. Rather, it means that people with certain genetic risks can choose to use NFP for that reason. Pope Pius XII also added that these well-grounded reasons don't arise rarely. So a couple doesn't have to be at its absolute physical, emotional, and financial limit to be justified in using NFP. The reasons to do so must be well-grounded. Here I'd like to point out that no form of contraception, neither artificial nor natural, has a 100% effectiveness rate. So
I would like to say that I be hearing people talk about, oh, I would like to be financially stable before I have kids. And to be honest, that argument never really sat right with me. Because if you looked at it from a biblical standpoint, I remember back when the Jews used to get married, right? We've talked about this a little bit before. The man used to leave the house of his father and mother, go build his own house, invite the wife over when his father said it was okay, and then they start their family there. Meaning there was like always a time of financial stability, kind of, so to speak. Maybe not always, but that was the general assumption, was that you would go, leave your house, make a new house, start your family in that house. Simple enough. Nowadays, obviously, that's not the case. You can't just go and make a house, right? We don't do that. It's, you got to save up a little. But I think the general case is you shouldn't be getting married if you're not stable enough to have that. If you're not in a stable environment enough to make a family. Because when I read that they should both leave, or the girl should leave her father and mother's house and two should join together to become one flesh, I always saw that personally. Now, I haven't watched a sermon yet on that specific verse, or whenever it appears, because it appears quite frequently, but I haven't seen a thing about it. But whenever I read that, I just thought it meant making a baby, because I'm like, the two become one flesh. The kid is the one flesh of both the parents. They join together, communion, this love, this act, which we saw in the last video, and as she restated in this video, and then they become one flesh, make a baby. Right? That's how I always took it. So I was like, you shouldn't get married if you're not ready to immediately have that kid. I also think it's a testament to your faith in God too, if you have kids if you have kids yet without being fully financially stable. Or at least, not knowing, right? Because people have kids all the time without being financially stable. People have kids all the time without having a stable relationship. And they always work out. Now, obviously, you could say that, not always it works out. Like the kid ends up in blah, blah, blah. The kid is blah, blah, blah. And this happens and that happens in the future. And then, and you could say, technically, that kid was a failure, or this situation was a failure. However, it always seems to somehow make it happen. And especially, that's making it happen with the world on your side. Now imagine making it happen with God on your side. How would it not? Right? We see that the birds don't sow or reap. How much more will God feed us? Because he feeds the birds. The flowers, they don't have money. They don't dress themselves, yet they're clothed in the finest raiment, finer than Solomon with all his wealth, right? So God will take care of us. He takes care of us while we're here on our own. And then if we have a kid in the marriage covenant, the same one that exemplifies his relationship with his son and his son's relationship with us, that's our example. He will take care of us, right? And that's a testament to our faith. If we had kids while not being financially stable, he'll make sure it works, right? Especially because we have faith in him. It will work. Trust in God.
So the only way to avoid a pregnancy with a 100% certainty is abstinence. By the way, for the sake of completeness, I would like to mention that withdrawal, also called coitus interruptus, is considered immoral by the Catholic Church. The next question I'd like to address is what the difference is between NFP and contraception. Why does the Church prohibit contraception but permits NFP? While it's true that both methods are used to avoid a pregnancy, there are some significant differences. First of all, NFP relies on the couple exercising self-control, while contraception promotes intemperance. Second of all, NFP respects the female body because it cooperates with its natural rhythm instead of treating a woman's fertility like a disease. And finally, NFP doesn't violate natural law, just like counting calories doesn't violate the nature of eating. St. Pope Paul VI writes the following in his encyclical Humanae Vitae. Neither the Church nor her doctrine is inconsistent when she considers it lawful for married people to take advantage of the infertile period, but condemns as always unlawful the use of means which directly prevent conception, even when the reasons for the latter practice may appear to be upright and serious. In reality, these two cases are completely different. In the former, the married couple rightly use a faculty provided them by nature. In the latter, they obstruct the natural development of the generative process. It cannot be denied that in each case the married couple, for acceptable reasons, are both perfectly clear in their intention to avoid children and wish to make sure that none will result. But it is equally true that it is exclusively in the former case that husband and wife are ready to abstain from intercourse during the fertile period, as often as for reasonable motives the birth of another child is not desirable. And when the infertile period occurs, they use their married intimacy to express their mutual love and safeguard their fidelity toward one another. In doing this, they certainly give proof of a true and authentic love. Regarding the distinction between NFP and contraception, one could also use a very vivid example and say that this difference behaves like the difference between killing grandma and waiting until she dies. The result is the same, but the means are very different. Now let's get to the next question. Can infertile couples make love according to Catholic doctrine? The answer is yes. And if you think about the 3 reasons against contraception I explained at the beginning of this video, none of them apply to naturally infertile couples. But what about the argument that contraception leads to fewer abortions because fewer unplanned children are born? First of all, there is some evidence that contraception might actually lead to more abortions. This stems from the fact that with contraception, people engage in the act of baby making while not even being close to a position where they could welcome a potential child. This is the so-called Peltzman effect, which describes the phenomenon that people engage in more risky behaviors the more safety measures there are. Second of all, even if contraception always led to fewer abortions, doing something intrinsically evil can't be justified with a good intention or a good effect. Also, the principle of double effect doesn't apply here because the good effect of reducing abortions is brought about directly by the evil effect, namely contraception, and so the evil effect would be directly intended here, which isn't morally permissible. The last question I'd like to get to briefly regards the treatment of diseases that are treated with contraceptives. In this case, the Church permits the use of contraception because of the principle of double effect, as the intention is to cure a disease and the contraceptive aspect is an unintended byproduct. Finally, as promised, I'd like to share some personal thoughts on this teaching. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this is a difficult teaching. And by difficult, I don't necessarily mean difficult to accept, because the Catholic Church has good reasons to oppose contraception. By difficult, I mean difficult in the execution. But let's remember that the primary vocation of every human is to become a saint, and that marriage is supposed to help the couple become saints together. In my opinion, the Church's teaching on contraception is a great opportunity to practice virtue and consequently grow in holiness. Also, the more I observe what happens when you follow God's will, the more I realize the truth of this quote from St. Alphonsus. Beyond the possibility of a doubt, God works to effect our welfare infinitely better than we could ever hope to accomplish or desire it ourselves. The beauty I see in the Church's teaching on contraception is that it shows us the importance and attractiveness of self-control. If someone is unable to say no, their yes means nothing. This is true on so many levels, and it's also true in the case of sexual self-control. And from a woman's perspective, I think that self-control is sexy. And this also seems to be true from a man's perspective. Take a listen to what Jordan Peterson has to say on the matter.
I don't think there's anything more attractive to a man than a sophisticated woman who knows how to say no. Like that's top of the stack as far as men are concerned.
I'd like to end this video with a quote from G.K. Chesterton. "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried." That's been it for today. See you soon. God bless and bye.
There's only 2 questions that are left lingering in my mind after watching this video. The first is if a condom is considered contraception, but I guess we could just do a Google search. Even if it's not, I think the case she's making still stands for it, because like, you know, saying no and whatever, because the condom is just like, well, I want to love you now without the risk of making a baby, and then you're kind of just taking advantage of your sexual nature or whatever the case is. But Google also says that yes, condoms are a form of contraceptive because it is a barrier of method of birth control, preventing pregnancy, but still allowing sex to happen. And then my only other question would just be about the one verse that says something along the lines of, if you're gonna not have sex in your marriage, it should be for the betterment of both people's spiritual lives, something like that. So it's from 1 Corinthians 7. We're just going to read his verse up to verse 5. "So now concerning the things of where you wrote for me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. But the husband renders to the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife has not power of her own body, but the husband. Likewise the husband hath not power of his own body, but his wife. Defraud ye not the another, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, if sin tempts you, not for your own inconsistency or incontinency. But I speak this by permission, not of commandment." AKA, I'm saying this as a concession, not as a command. AKA, what is concession? I just gotta Google that word. Things granted, a compromise, an adjustment. It's not a command, that you withdraw only for that, but it's just like, you know, it helps out. So in another sense, do not deprive each other of marital rights except by mutual consent for a time, that you may devote yourselves unhindered to prayer, but come together again so that Satan will not tempt you to sin because of your lack of self-control. Basically saying, you know, be having sex unless you guys are trying to fast and do prayer, but also, you know when to cut it short, because temptation, and maybe you'll go and be infidelity. I don't know. I actually don't know, because right, this verse says, they cannot contain it, let them marry, for it is better than to marry than to burn. And to the married I command, yet I did not the life depart from her husband, if she depart and remain unmarried, blah blah blah, because the husband ought to be put away. Kind of saying like, have sex, don't not have sex unless you're giving the fasting and prayer. And then if you're unmarried, you know what I'm saying, it's better than to marry and have sex than to burn with desire to have sex, because you're unmarried and or a widow, which means that it's natural to burn with desire to have sex. And it's saying to have a lot of sex in a marriage, but obviously you're not trying to have unlimited kids, right? Unless you are, because I'm really trying to think of how this natural family planning would go into a marriage back in this time period when this stuff was being taught, because they would have just had so many kids, right? Like, who's a married figure in the Bible back then, or even anything? Because these people would all have mad kids, right? Unless their sex drive was just way lower back then. But I don't know. These are just questions to think about. I don't know. I hope this video did something for you. As an unmarried person, I don't really know what it did for me. Maybe think about contraceptive. I was always kind of against the whole birth control pills day after type thing anyway, in terms of thought. Right, condoms, it's a toss-up, right? It's a toss-up. I definitely like the point she was trying to make there, how it's like, you know, this is an exercise in self-control. Obviously you shouldn't just be having sex all the time on demand, but also, is that not part of the point of marriage? Where it says don't defraud the other one, right? Don't deny the other partner their marital rights. If they want it, give it up to them, essentially. But I'm not a teacher, and I'm unmarried, so I couldn't tell you. But maybe you got something, leave it down for me in the comments. I'll check it out. Real quick, the thing I forgot to mention, the verse thing that I said maybe she'll bring it up at around the 4-minute mark in this video, my video, was this verse from Genesis 38:9-10, where it talked about a man spilling his seed on the ground because his brother had died without a child, meaning back then it was his job to make sure that the wife had a kid, and he basically hit the pullout method, and God didn't like that, so the Lord killed him, right? Because we would see, refused his obligation, knew the child born the child would be not his own, it would belong to his dead brother. Where did I want to talk about this? And I think that this has some weird implications to the argument she was making as well, because not only is it talking about the contraceptive, or not the conceptive part of having sex, right? If somebody died, then back then it was customary for the brother to have sex with the lady to give to make a child, abstracting that love aspect of the sex because it wasn't there, fully focusing on conception. But if somebody's pregnant and you're having a bunch of sex, then there's no conceptive part of it, it's just love. So I don't know, I feel like there's some weird points to be made. I don't think I made that clear at all what I was trying to say, but I think I explicated it enough where it's like, this is all focused on having a kid, no love, versus the inverse. Say, for example, if you're counting the calendar, the natural family planning, it's all love, no conception, and you know that there's no conception, and you're gaming the system for no conception. It's the same way she was talking about throwing up is the same thing for eating or whatever. So by the same metric, are you gaming the system if you eat a whole bunch of gluttony, but then you throw it up, bulimia, right? Is kind of where my head's at. You guys tell me what you think in the comments. I think it's a very interesting subject, and I'm glad she brought it up. All right, that's gonna be the end of the video. Hope you guys have yourself a fantastic rest of your day. Peace.